All right, so the meeting is live and recording at this moment. Zach, I'm going to turn hosting over to you and then I'll hop off the meeting.
Great. Welcome to the Energy and Buildings Committee. To start off with, we have a new member, Mike. And so, Howard, I thought maybe we could actually just talk a bit about how we've gotten to this point. Do you want to maybe start and just kind of say, where did this all begin and where's it taken us up until now? And then maybe I can fill in any additional stuff.
Sure. Well, Mike, I guess I don't know who originated the idea or whether it was both Zach and I, but I guess about 2 or 3 years ago, we happened on the idea that we knew that the franchise agreement with Northwest Natural was expiring. And so we thought it might present an opportunity to look at the franchise agreement and see if there was an opportunity to require some greenhouse gas emission reductions, among other things. And we formed a committee then and started researching. I guess Zach and I are probably the only ones original on that. We've had some commissioners come and go, of course, and that were on the committee and have dropped off when they were no longer on the commission. But we started researching this and discovered that no city or state that had a franchise agreement with a private utility such as Northwest Natural had ever looked at using an agreement as a mechanism to do anything other than what had been traditionally done, which is have the utility pay a fee for the right to use the city or county or whatever the entity is, their right of way. And so that, traditionally has been these franchise agreements. Northwest Natural pays X amount to the city, and the city allows Northwest Natural to use city-owned right-of-way for maintenance and expansion of the natural gas system without having to go through, some kind of permitting process or separate fee arrangement for each time they use the right-of-way, whether it's the side of a road or in the road or street or whatever. So we started researching that, and it wasn't, anyway, we discovered a lot of things, the involvement of the Public Utility Commission in Oregon and its rate setting and how they try to make sure that, customers are paying the lowest rate. And so like any fee adjust, franchise agreement things, PUC has to approve it and all that. But anyway, there's not been any precedent for what we were looking at. So from that kind of evolved this committee coming up with a number of ideas on what might potentially be included in a franchise agreement, and the commission endorsed that, and we forwarded that on to the city manager and the city council for their consideration. And so this whole Northwest Natural thing has been percolating, I guess, for the last 2 years at least. Right. And and as you know, the franchise agreement, I guess, expired October of 2019, I believe. And since then, the council has extended it 3 times. They've been negotiating with Northwest Natural. It doesn't appear at this point that those negotiations are going to be fruitful. And as you've read and seen on the city council work session, I guess last Monday, it's kind of in an impasse. And I think there was a deadline this past Friday. Yeah, as to whether, if there was not going to be an agreement, then there was no way that the process would allow for public hearing and all that, because it does require the council to pass an ordinance for the agreement. So that agreement is probably going, well, I guess it's going to expire in May because that was the last extension. And so here we are. And so I guess, trying to figure out what the next steps are going to be. But anyway, I think the commission was really the one that kind of initiated the discussion about trying to put something in the franchise agreement that aligned with the city's climate recovery ordinance and desire to meet the goals in that ordinance. And, I've always been skeptical that Northwest Natural would ever agree to anything because, we're basically having a discussion that flies in the face of their business model and, trying to put them eventually out of business. So most public companies or, the private sector are not too interested in putting themselves out of business. So I understand all that, but so here we are. So I guess we've got to figure out what the next steps are going to be. Since there's not going to be a franchise agreement, I kind of wonder how long that's going to last, because with the franchise agreement expiring, it's my understanding that anytime that Northwest Natural wants to do anything in the city-owned right-of-way, they're going to have to get a permit for it.
That's going to be a mess.
It's going to be a mess. And, even routine maintenance, I guess that's going to be a problem. I guess if there's an emergency or leak or something, I would assume that there'd be some, exclusion of having to go through an individual permit or something. But it's kind of uncharted territory. So it's going to be interesting to see how long the impasse is going to last. And I'm not sure it's going to be very good for either customers of Northwest Natural or Northwest Natural to have to operate under that, scenario.
Do you guys know what the hangups are? I mean, as far as, what were they stuck on?
Well, I think anything related to greenhouse gas emission reductions, I think Northwest Natural wants it to be voluntary and collaborative. The city is insisting that there be some hard and fast requirements in the franchise agreement, and it's not voluntary. These are going to be the goals and the metrics that need to be met. I think that's the impasse.
Right. So it was essentially anything attached to this franchise agreement was a problem.
I think so, other than what was traditionally in an agreement. And I guess for some of us, I think if you don't have an agreement, it's not necessarily enforceable.
Right. Well, for sure. And that was clear how the council felt when the last session, is that they felt without that attached, they call it stapled to it, that it has some teeth. It becomes just well, we hope you do this kind of thing.
Exactly. I know, Zach, did I kind of summarize?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would add is that at the beginning, we put out, I think, 6 different questions for council to look at, of basically what's the city's authority to regulate natural gas. That information ended up in that gap analysis document I sent out that I want to bring up later in the meeting, because I think it's got a lot of really good information about what some of the alternatives are. In terms of sticking points, I think there's sticking points around who controls the money around the RNG piece, because I think that Northwest Natural wants to control the RNG money. And then there's this question mark of, essentially, can Northwest Natural rip up the climate agreement and still have the franchise agreement stay in effect, which is what they want. They want to be able to rip up one and have the other just stay intact. And council says, no, you rip up one, you rip up both. So those are the hangups right now.
Okay.
In terms of my perspective, I think, the 2 things that I would like this group to look at is, is this actually a good proposal in terms of greenhouse gas impacts? I would like to know, okay, if we're getting $1 million a year from this fee, what does that actually get us in terms of reductions? And how does that compare to, business as usual growth for natural gas? I don't want to end up in a situation where we make some token investments in efficiency, but natural gas use goes up on net. I think that would be a bad place for the city to end up with this proposal. So I'd like to try and get some numbers on essentially the energy efficiency, how effective that is at reducing emissions, like how much on a dollar per ton basis can we actually expect from that area. And then I'd also like us to actually go through that gap analysis document and think through, what policies in working together would actually get us to where we want to go, hopefully at a relatively low cost. So in terms of research, I think those are things that would be helpful is, where does this deal get us? And of the policies that have previously been put on the table and reviewed by council, which ones would actually get us to our goal if the franchise agreement won't? Do you guys have thoughts on, does that seem like a reasonable place for us to try and head?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right, as a starting point, maybe we can actually just go through that gap analysis document and kind of see what information we have and what information we maybe will still need. Does that sound appropriate?
Sure.
Great. Sorry, give me just 1 second to get the right thing up here.
Did you guys do most of the work in this analysis?
In the gap analysis?
Yeah.
No, that's staff work.
Okay.
So we generated a couple of the ideas that they reviewed, but that's largely a staff document.
Okay.
Let's see, that looks really small. Can you guys see that? Can you guys see this document?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So in terms of the ideas that the commission recommended, it was essentially the 1 through 7 here. When you're reading these, and so it's really, when it comes down to it, I think that if you don't count offsets, it's really just 3. It's, do you limit new natural gas infrastructure and service? Do you require people to switch to non-gas equipment at the time of expiration, when it's time to replace? And can you require biogas or renewable hydrogen? There's also number 8 is around essentially doing what council is now doing, increasing the franchise fee and dedicating the funds to, well, this says from natural gas to renewable, but they're doing it for energy efficiency. So really the other one on the table is like energy efficiency right now. All of the last ones are mostly around doing some type of a fee to pay for stuff. So those are sort of, where we started. Those are the actions. The staff actually did a lot of work in looking at what some of the potential costs of many of those actions would be, which is listed here. I happen to kind of disagree with their thinking on one of these, but other than that, it's all really good information. And then further down, we have the potential greenhouse gas impact of the policies. So I think, and ideally we could actually go through here and I started putting this into another document, but basically try and figure out what set of these in all together would actually add up to getting us to our goal. and hopefully incorporate some of the cost information that was up above. Howard, I think you've seen a lot of this before. Mike, is this all making sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to wrap your mind around at first, you know, and I did get to look at it a little bit, but before, but yeah, I mean, it's it makes sense, I guess, is the best way to leave it for now.
So in terms of information that I think is missing, on the cost information, where I think it had, sorry, give me just 1 second. So some limits on the cost information. I think that they did not have information on the cost of renewable gas. So it would be really nice to be able to get some information on that. In terms of actions 3 and 5, which are around basically switching out appliances at the time of replacement. I don't think they actually, I think their logic is really weird here, and that they said that it's going to be similar to the fees, like a $15 per ton fee, like a carbon price would be, or another type of fee would be, when really it's, you know, what is the marginal cost of switching to electricity at time of replacement for a stove. And so anyways, I'm hoping to find a better number there. And then on energy efficiency, I wrote a note to the general manager at eWeb, basically asking what numbers they have. And he sent me basically a very, very high level number that they invested $2.5 million last year, which resulted in about a 15 million kilowatt hour reduction. Transferring that over to natural gas, that would be about a $10 million investment, would be about a 10,000 ton decrease in emissions. And so anyways, I'm hoping to follow up with him and basically get some more detailed information on what the impacts of energy efficiency improvements are, and hopefully getting to some type of a dollar per ton figure for efficiency investments, so that we can actually kind of understand what an increased franchise fee, an extra like $1 million a year from that, what the impacts of that would be. Hopefully with some fair amount of confidence. So I'm hoping we can get some info from eWeb on that. So that's sort of where I'm hoping to take things. Any questions or thoughts about how we might be able to get there or work on something together?
Well,
Go ahead,
Mike.
No, please go ahead.
Well, Zach, one thing that I'm interested in on some of these is whether the city has the legal authority to actually do some of these things. And so I'd be interested in having some discussion about that. As you know, as far as like, can the city prohibit Northwest Natural from issuing financial incentives for installing not only natural gas service, but also installing appliances, and then also whether the city can prevent the installation of new natural gas fueled appliances. I don't think they can prohibit the purchase of them, but because I mean, you could go to Springfield or, wherever and purchase a new stove or something. But how would they regulate the installation of that?
And
So,
also along that same line is how would you enforce it? Even if it was illegal, how do you do that?
well, you probably have to do it through the building permit system, I would guess. So, unless you are a handy person and do it yourself and risk violating your homeowner's insurance. But, typically you would have a plumber or, HVAC person, install a stove or heating cooling system. And that requires a city permit, and those are usually inspected. So I suppose that there might be a way to do that through the building permit process, but I don't know if the city can do that or not. And maybe they can, I don't know, but that'd be something that would be worth looking at before. Seems to me that would be the first question on some of these things. And before we go down through go through the effort of trying to understand the cost and of doing these and the cost per ton reduction that might potentially be achieved.
Anything else, Mike? I mean, I'll just state, I totally agree. I think we're entitled to like 2 hours of staff time for this committee. It's probably the city's lawyer that would have to answer these questions. So hopefully we can hear back from her in a not too lengthy time frame. If we were to add, I think that's a reasonable question to ask is does the city have the authority and what's the mechanism to, put it into place or to enforce?
And for that,
do you need a permit just to switch? If you say you're going to say, okay, I'm going to Springfield, I'm going to buy a gas stove, I'm going to replace my old one with a new one. Do you need a permit for that?
I'm not sure.
And that's good to know, because it's always one question when you start putting ordinances and making things illegal is that, how are they going to go into homes and enforce that?
Well, certainly if you're going to put in a new gas furnace, for example, most everybody would hire a contractor to do that. And of course, they'd have to be licensed and you'd need a permit for that.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Well,
but I was wondering, Zach, if some of these issues have been evaluated by the city attorney as part of the behind closed door negotiations with Northwest Natural. So I guess that's just a question.
I would hope that having had these for over 2.5 years, that they would have actually figured out if we have the authority to do them, but I don't know if they actually have for all of them.
Right.
So that's the fact that we've gone down this rabbit hole with the franchise negotiations for 2 years. I think a lot of this information just never really got its due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think asking that question of the city staff and attorney to try and say, can you tell us which of these we're actually allowed to do, would be would be certainly good information to get before we, somebody's going to need to answer that information at some point if these are actually going to be considered in a meaningful way.
Because I remember when we first asked the question about what can and can't be included in a franchise agreement, I think we got a non-answer because some of this was precedent setting and no one really had tried it before. So I kind of wonder if might be in the same boat on some of these.
I mean, from what I've heard and what I've read, it looks like the city would potentially have the authority to do to require renewable gas subject to approval by the PUC. And limiting and prohibiting new gas infrastructure. I think the city has basically said they do have that authority to control its right of way. It's really the appliance ones of, can you require somebody to basically change out their old, when they go to buy a new one, can you say you can't replace your old gas with a new gas one? And I think I really don't know. And I don't know if the city attorney has really tried to answer that question.
Yeah, or whether any municipality anywhere has done that. I know some cities have prohibited new connections to natural gas, but I don't know if they've taken the next step of, when you're switching out or replacing appliances after their service life, whether you can require they go to electric appliance or not.
I am not aware of any municipality that has done that yet.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it's all around stopping new construction.
Right.
First, but I think a lot of folks are thinking about how do you do that? In that there's probably not enough renewable gas to meet current demand. And so building heat is kind of one of those main places that people look to reduce demand as well. So,
well, there was an op-ed in the Register Guard this weekend from the PR person at Northwest Natural, implying that there was enough renewable natural gas, but for residential. So, they're being a little
residential is only a third of their emissions.
I know they're being a little deceptive about that. But anyway.
So apparently we just got to get rid of 2/3 of their emissions. They told us exactly how much RNG there. Anyway.
It's like buying, wind energy. It's on the grid, and yeah, you're kind of buying it, but it's, there's still other kinds of electricity on the grid. Anyway. Well, it seems to me that maybe one of the first things we could do is put a request in to through Samantha, I guess, and asking if city attorney's office have done a legal analysis on any of these actions, and what authority the city has or to do these, or whether existing state law or city governance is kind of silent on these. I'd be interested in knowing that.
That makes total sense to me. Is that this is a lot of work, and you just a base understanding of the legality of it seems like it's good thinking.
Because I know when we were first looking at the franchise agreement, just kind of general and what could and couldn't be included, it wasn't really clear as to how far the city could push things. And again, it's just because I think no one's ever tried that before anywhere. We looked not only in Oregon, but just did internet searches on what other if other cities, counties have done that anywhere. We couldn't really find anything.
Okay, I mean that's easy enough to put in a request for that. Can also kind of just put in the request to say, if there's additional information on the cost questions that's come up in the last, I think, year and a half since this document was put together. If they have any more up-to-date information, I think I'm going to try and follow up with eWeb around the basically the cost savings and greenhouse and kilowatt hour greenhouse gas impact of energy efficiency investments. And I guess I'll send the same question to staff to ask if they've gotten more information on that, because it was not provided in this document, even though it was asked for. And and then we can go from there, hopefully in about 2 or 3 weeks or however long staff takes to get back to us on the legality question.
It would be good to understand too, what the cost is of switching out. If you have natural gas heating,
That's this number 3 and 5 here, or I guess it's number 3 here essentially, where I think the cost information that was provided in this document is just not correct.
Yeah.
Do you know where we could find what that cost is, what that marginal cost of replacement is? There's some info on, like, from Rocky Mountain Institute on, the comparative costs of new infrastructure, or, a new building, and then electricity is cheaper, but I don't think it has info on, if you're coming in after 15 years and trying to put in a whole new heat duct system versus, just replacing an old gas furnace.
Yeah, and then also just understanding what the cost difference would be as far as operation, because there's always this narrative that the gas industry has, that they're so much cheaper to heat than electricity. And with newer, more efficient electric heating, it'd be interesting to better understand what that cost difference is, because I think it's going to be a question that is going to be asked, and if we're going to require people to fuel switch, if you will, then what is the economic impact going to be on them, for residences?
Zach, I wonder if they're going to cover that in the electrification study coming out.
I don't know. I think that primarily UAB is looking at its capacity to, handle fuel switching on a large scale basis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they're looking at, what the marginal cost for consumers would be.
Right.
Because I think it's primarily focused on their infrastructure and the capacity of their infrastructure to handle.
I see.
Okay, well, I think I've got some questions here to send to staff, and then I guess just whatever we're able to research on the same questions, in our own time, of what's the city's legal authority to do these things, and what are the cost impacts for. Really, I think it's just, we don't have numbers for RNG. I don't know if they're going to have any better ones, but it would be really good to have numbers for, what is the marginal cost of switching out, an old furnace or an old stove, and what is the cost benefit? What are the impacts of efficiency investments? If we spend $1 million on efficiency, what does that actually get us in terms of reductions? The electric or gas sector. Does that sound like a good place to start? We'll ask those questions, and
on a cost per ton basis. So I'm particularly interested in investments that get the most reductions.
On efficiency, I think that the investments generally pay for themselves. It's really a question of scale. How much emission reductions from efficiency can you actually get? Because we're not going to be able to get a 50% reduction from efficiency alone. In fact, over 10 years, I would be surprised if we could get more than a 10% or even a 5% reduction from efficiency without spending a lot more money than is talked about being spent up until this point. Mm-hmm. I did a really super, napkin math earlier today, and it looked like $10 million would reduce residential natural gas use about 10%, but do nothing for industrial. And meanwhile, residential gas use, we would continue, if they keep adding accounts, a 10% reduction is going to be offset by the increase in accounts, and, who knows what happens with industrial at that point. So, anyway, I want to follow up with Frank Lawson, the general manager of eWeb, and get as much info as I can, that as much detail as they have. He suggested that there was one other website that NEEA, I think. I'll forward you the message right after we get off, but that might be a place to look. And he basically said that they'd be willing to do more research for us as well. They would get more info if we wanted it. So hopefully get some good information from them.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else, I will just plan on sending those questions to Samantha after this meeting, and I'll CC you guys, and then try and get an ETA for how long that'll take to get back to us, and then we can try and plan our next meeting around that. Does that sound good?
Sounds like a plan.
You're muted, Mike.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I put the that website in the chat if you want to look at it. The NEA.
And what is that acronym?
It's a Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Okay.
It looks like it's, got some good information in there. I'm happy to make a call to permitting to see what, because I still have the question of, you can put the best ordinance out there, but do we have the resources to, and if there's an easier way, I mean, that's you're correct that if you to change out an appliance, you need a you need a permit. I've only lived here for 2.5 years, so I've never had to do it, but I have done it in other places, and it's not necessarily something I would even need to call a contractor for. It's pretty straightforward. But so anyway, I'm happy to make that call if you guys like, or if you want to go to let staff do it, that's fine too. But
I don't think it hurts to make a phone call. That would be great if you could do that. I mean, I'll send this email to staff, but doesn't necessarily mean that it'll get answered at all, let alone quickly. So if you're able to make that phone call, that would be great. Because my guess is that you actually don't need a permit to.
Yeah, that's my sense, but and so the very next question is that back to how do you enforce that? You can buy, we're not going to be able to outlaw those appliances everywhere. I mean, you can get them online. I mean, it's not like you are going to be able to stop the manufacturing or purchasing of them. And it seems like the only way to do it would be at the time of hookup, changing that, or I don't know, maybe watch the dump to see who's throwing one away. But I can't wrap my mind around how that would actually, be able to be enforced, I guess.
Well, I think if someone buys a new water heater or stove or something and decides to put it in themselves, yes, it's probably not enforceable. But if someone buys a new water heater from Jerry's or Lowe's and has a contractor put it in, then I think that's what would trigger the building permit. I know I needed an extra electrical receptacle put in, and so I hired an electrician to do that. The city has an expedited permit program for simple things like that, where you don't have to go through a lot of hoops, and they have certain contractors that are part of that program, and that's how they do that anyway. But I don't know, I can guarantee if you have a contractor that puts in a new water heater, you're going to need some kind of a permit. And you'd probably want a permit anyway as a homeowner to protect yourself if something happened and that water heater was incorrectly installed. And you know, if you did it yourself, there's a high potential that your insurance company wouldn't pay for any damages to your property if it was a result of improper installation. I mean, I hear that all the time. You know, yeah, usually 9 times out of 10, there's not going to be a problem. But anyway, just, as I said, you know, if you hire a contractor to do something like that, I suspect it's going to trigger at least some kind of a permit from the city.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that if you're not doing that work yourself, you're probably required to use a licensed contractor to do it. Either that, or you know, if these companies do the installation themselves, I would assume there would be some way to say, you know, if you have a business doing this type of stuff, you shall not do X. You know, you shall not install this. You know, basically saying a company is not allowed to deliver or install, you know, this thing or face fines or fees or whatever. You know, they're going to make sure their business is not liable for that. So,
right, okay,
might not be as straightforward as a permitting process, but I think, you know, that's why we'll ask the question. So we'll send it to staff and hopefully they can get it to the legal team. And then if you're able to just call to ask the permitting question, that would be great.
okay.
All right. Well, anything else for the good of the order here before we sign off and check back in and hopefully not too distant future?
No, can't be everything.
All right.
I'm
Thanks for your help,
good.
everybody. Talk to you soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Zach.
guys.
Bye.